Let's Talk Small Business, the real talk, no BS podcast for business owners and entrepreneurs who want to grow and actually enjoy the ride. I'm Mitchell Wilson. Let's get into it. Okay, today's guest, Javier Lozano, founder and fractional CMO at Boulder Solutions. Javier's story is not your typical marketing resume. He's launched and sold a profitable business during the recession with no funding. He's helped scale a tech company from 1 million to over 20 million in just 3.5 years. He's built demand generation systems and even landed a national GTM partnership with Volkswagen. Now, he is known for fighting what he calls random acts of marketing and replacing them with structured, revenue-driven growth engines. So, if you are listening now, you're doing between 300 and 3 million possibly, and your marketing feels reactive, scattered, or overly dependent on you as the founder, this conversation is going to hit home. Javier, let's talk small business.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the show, Mitchell. Really excited about this.
Yeah, no, me too. So, let's start off. Take us back to the beginning. What did your first business teach you about growth during, I guess, economic conditions?
Yeah, so I started my first company in 2008. So for some of you that might remember, that was during the Great Recession. I don't know if New Zealand had that same economic effect, but for us, it was pretty bad.
Of course we did. I was actually on holiday in London at the time, and all these people are looking stunned, walking around in their suits. And a whole lot of the banking industry, it just collapsed right at that time. I remember it very vividly when I was on holiday there. Yeah.
Well, then it's good to know so that everyone kind of, can remember this. Not that we want to go back and remember it, but it is, I consider that as like almost the ticket to play into this game of being an entrepreneur and starting your own business. I wouldn't have chosen this time frame, but it did actually create the kind of leader that I am today when it comes
to... It forces great habits, doesn't it?
It totally does. You've got to be extremely agile and smart on how you're doing what you're doing. You got to be willing to pivot. You can't be married to one solution or one strategy, and you've got to be just creative and strategic. So that, to be quite honest, it forced me to operate everything in a more of like a bootstrap kind of a approach where every dollar, every penny really mattered. My time was more valuable. And so I gave a lot of time at the beginning. That was my investment, if you will, so I understand I can relate to those folks that are running 300K businesses because you're putting sweat equity as your resource because you can't really put true dollars behind everything. But that really shaped everything for me. That's where it all started. I never would have picked that time frame, but then looking back in hindsight, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And so I'm very grateful for that moment and that experience. I was happy to exit that company in 2018. Not a lot of folks are able to actually sell a company that is wrapped around themselves at the beginning and eventually kind of phase themselves out of it. So that was a great experience. It taught me just a ton of just creating the right kind of strategies and frameworks and processes to be successful.
Cool. What type of company was it, Javier?
It was a personal training and martial arts studio.
Awesome.
For some folks that may not know, but I used to compete professionally in sports martial arts and traveled all over the country. In 2000 or 2001, I ended up winning a world title in sports fighting, and it was a great part of my life. And that was kind of like one of my life goals. Was like I want to open a studio. I want to just teach martial arts until like I'm 80, and didn't really hit 80. But I taught enough to where I'm like, what? I've achieved a lot of my dreams, and it was kind of an exciting season in my life that I was able to do. So check that off the box. You know
what's funny is that I too have also been in that industry and scaled from the ground up a studio with a great exit or a couple of studios. But unlike you, I actually never stepped foot in the gym before. So I don't know how I ended up doing that.
Wow, that's impressive. That's awesome, man. I never would have thought that. It's when I did it, I was the person doing all the classes and cleaning the bathrooms and doing all the sales and all the marketing. And eventually it became to where I had the systems that allowed me to step away further. And some folks have asked me like, well, why don't you just keep it and just, cash flow it and have someone else operate it? I really wanted to try something different. I was ready for a new path in my journey. And, it's hard to reinvent yourself several times. And that was one of those things I had to do, but it was a very grateful moment.
Well, unlike you, I guess the moment that worked well for me is because I couldn't do a whole lot of that stuff. I had no idea. I had to build a team around me and systemize it to make it work. So it kind of forced me because I couldn't coach a class, for instance, as an example.
Yeah. No, totally get that.
Okay. So let's pick on when you're looking around companies. It's a nice mark, that $1 million mark that, companies first get to, but then they kind of get stuck. What do you think they usually get wrong at that point?
It's funny. I was actually talking about this with another colleague the other day. I believe where they get wrong is where they make their hires. And a lot of the times, and this is nothing against founders and whatnot, but a lot of the times, one of the top hires that you make whenever you're trying to transition from founder led to like scale is a salesperson. And it's just like, to them, it's just straight math. It's like, well, if salesperson is really good and they add to the bottom line, then, we're making revenue, everyone's going to be winning. And I consider that as not a bad hire, but I would consider that as a delay the hire. Don't do it quite yet. And if you don't have a strong marketing background, either bring somebody in at a fractional basis to help you build out the right messaging and positioning of your company before you bring in your hire for a salesperson. Now, the salesperson could be pretty low level, mid tier. This person could be a VP, if you will. But some people kind of say like, well, they're going to bring a book of business. We all kind of experience that not all of those book of businesses turn out to be actual real dollars. All they have is just networking and probably a few phone calls. So what you want to do is you want to create the foundation to make people successful when they start selling your brand or your services or product. And the best way of doing that is giving them like the right type of tools to enable their engagements. And that's going to be a more successful situation, in my opinion. Now, I'm a little biased. I understand that. However, I've seen it played both ways.
Okay. So I'm going to hit on that fractional CMO position really, really soon. Before we get to that, during your history though, one of the moments we talked about in the intro was that you helped companies scale from 1 to 20 million in under 4 years,
Yep.
which is awesome work. What do you think changed in the way you approach go to market during that run?
So what we did, and a lot of the times a CMO is going to come in and they might come in and be like, hey, we need to change our messaging. We need to change our website. We need to change this. We need to change that. Don't do that. Don't change the website. Leave everything as is. And that's exactly what I did. I came in and didn't touch the website, didn't touch the messaging. Like what we did is we were looking at what was working really well. Like, hey, where are the signals that are just like we're closing all day long? And what we were noticing is that whenever we were targeting, this company was a vehicle graphics company, vehicle wraps. We wrapped vehicles or wrapped cars all over the country for just more like SMB companies like Joe the Plumbers of the world. And so what happened is that our audience that we were trying to acquire, we were doing a lot of paid acquisition, were actually on Meta. And most of our dollars were being spent on Google. This is before I even had a chance to look underneath the hood. They had an agency doing all the stuff. As I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, we're getting $2 and $3 leads, which some people are like, oh, it's amazing. $2 and $3 leads. We should all be excited, but they weren't converting. And so our sales team was just basically chasing bad leads. But then whenever we were getting leads from like Meta, they were getting on the phone. They were having great conversations. There was opportunities there. And so what we noticed is that for every 100 leads we generated, 15 of those were coming from Meta and 85 of those were essentially coming from Google. And like those 15 were ICP. Once we started shifting our budget all the way over to Meta, most of it, then all of a sudden we were generating for every 100 leads, 95 of those were our ICP. That gave our team a better chance of closing these deals. So what we did is we evaluated everything before we went and started changing stuff. And so then we were like, okay, we're going to go after home services. We're going to double down on this. And then we're going to start tweaking our messaging to make sure it resonates with them. But we were doing it internally. It was going to be done via email, via text messages, phone calls. It was an internal change to make sure that made sense. And then we would take that to market. And that's the best way, in my opinion, to do this is that you find where the signals and triggers are to ensure that you're not going to just break everything.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So last thing, I guess, in that founders era, what do you think's the biggest mindset shift founders have to make if they want to stop winging it?
They have to be willing to give up control. And I've been in that founder seat, so I can speak to that. And it's your baby. It is. I'll put you this way, Mitchell, you don't know this, but when I started my first company, I was so committed to it, I tattooed the company on my back.
How big is that tattoo?
It's I don't know, a good size.
Well, that's committed. Yeah.
I was that committed to making this thing work. And I'm not saying that a founder needs to tattoo their company on their back or anything like that to show that they're committed to what they're trying to do. For me, it was like, there was a reason behind it. But where I'm coming from is that I can relate to giving up your baby. It is something that you've built from the ground up. You have the most passion. You understand that, you have all this drive. I get that. I can relate that. But I believe that in order to properly scale a company, you've got to step away and you've got to give the keys to someone that understands on how to actually scale from 0 to 1, 1 to 10. That understands those steps, because there's things that the founder brings to the table that no one has. And so what we want to do is we want to extract that information from their brain and put that into playbooks or into strategies to help basically kind of clone the founder, because that story is very valuable. And so we want to use that. And so that's what I would do is I'd try to find a way to pull them away and then leverage what is like just so unique about them. And then maybe pull them in for like more of the thought leadership, the areas where they can create followings and they can create their own kind of positioning that's going to make their brand and themselves stand out.
Okay. Now, you're one to say that every company needs an enemy.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah. So I believe that you need to find an enemy for your company to fight against. And now that enemy is not a person and is not a competitor. It's none of those. It is a situation. It is something. So as you mentioned at the intro, my enemy is random acts of marketing. And we see this all the time where we see, companies that are, just kind of figuring stuff out, their social posts and then a blog. Hey, maybe we'll just do some ads on Google really quick. How do we get on ChatGPT ads and it's all that. So random acts of marketing is what I'm battling against, because that's actually going to hurt you more than anything else. Because then you start saying, well, marketing doesn't work. That's not true. It does work. Another great person that has a really awesome enemy, if you're familiar with Donald Miller, he's the founder of StoryBrand, and his enemy is noise. That is his enemy. That is their company enemy. And what they've done is they've even taken it even further to where they've almost indoctrinated, if you will, their team to fight against noise and to create clarity. And so what I would take this further is that not only do you have an enemy that you publicly say it, but you have an enemy that you have your internal team believe in it, because it creates a movement. You have evangelists that are now fighting against that enemy. And now they're no longer selling. They're simply just saying, hey, we can't stand this. And you shouldn't be putting up with this either. It's unfair for you. It's not good for you. And this is bad for society. When you create that movement, it is way different when it comes to how you sell and position your brand and your company, because you're no longer trying to get them to convince to buy something. You're just saying, are you against this enemy or are you for them?
I love it. I love it. And it makes me smile, random acts of marketing, because it happens so often.
Yeah.
I see it all the time.
I'm guilty of it. So, I mean,
I've been guilty of it as well, of course. Okay, so if someone's listening right now, what are the first signs that their marketing is reactive instead of strategic?
I would say there's a couple of things. Did you lay out a game plan, like just a 90-day strategy of what the plan is, like what the goal, what the strategy, and what the tactics are? Okay. Goal meaning like, are we trying to hit a certain revenue number? Are we trying to bring in a certain X amount of clients? Like not leads, not, impressions. That's below something that is going to be moving the business forward. So that would be the first thing, is like, what is our goal that we're all going after? Okay. And then from there, do we have like 2 or 3, maybe 4, but 2 or 3 strategies that we believe that we're going to make hypothetical guesses here that's going to impact our goal. Okay. And then from there, do we have any tactics, the levers that we get to pull that's going to impact the strategy that impacts the goal? And so if I don't see that, then it becomes a random acts of marketing. Or here's another one. If it's the CEO or the founder saying, I saw so-and-so doing this, we should try that. And the challenge there is that if you've already built out the strategy, you can simply just say, sir or ma'am, I'm sorry, but that's not part of our strategy. We're happy to address that maybe Q2 or Q3. But for right now, our strategy is based around this because we believe this is going to help us hit this goal. That keeps everyone in line. And so it's really kind of just keeping things as simple as possible. Like you don't have to have I was talking to somebody the other day saying like, we have a 5-year marketing plan. I'm like, are you kidding? In my head, I'm thinking that is ridiculous. And I would never do that in my own life. Never build out a 5-year marketing plan. I mean, let's just face it. We've seen how much everything's changed with AI in just 3 months.
I'm kind of thinking the marketings that you will be using in 5 years' time may not even exist right now.
Exactly my point. And so in my head, I'm like, that is just asinizing. Like, and I can't believe you would do something like that. So I believe, especially for small businesses, build quarter by quarter. You keep the same kind of like overall concept, but you pivot your strategy slightly within what you've built out every quarter. So you can look back and be like, when we did this didn't really work that well. Let's just pivot a little bit. Let's tweak it, but let's keep going forward.
Now, Javier, you're a fractional CMO. There'll be people listening that are kind of scratching their heads going, what is that? So explain a little bit about what it is that you do, and probably more importantly, at what stage a business should be looking at someone like yourself.
Yeah. So fractional CMO is the best way I can explain this is you're getting executive marketing leadership at a fraction of the investment. Okay. So the challenge is that a lot of companies that are wanting to scale, they got product market fit. They are getting, essentially they're building the momentum there. People are buying, but they don't have the right marketing leadership because they probably don't have the resources to pay them. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I really believe that, a fractional leader in marketing or in finance or in sales are great investments at different stages of your company. And so I see that if you're about $1 million to 10, maybe 15 million, and that is where you're growing and you're scaling, and you notice that like, you know what, like it's becoming where there's like misalignment and we don't have the right strategy and I can't really predict pipeline. And just things just kind of feel kind of like it just depends. Like that's when it's time to start bringing in a fractional leader on the marketing side. And so that's where I come in. I come in and start building that foundation. And my goal, I tell this to all my founders and CEOs, is that I want to work myself out of a job. I want to build the foundation to the point where you've got the right type of structure, their strategy that we're going forward, and we bring in the right people to keep the engine running, because that is where you have a scalable business where then you can go for a round of funding if you want to, or you can start actually making actual real projections that your CFO is going to stand behind, be like, yes, I believe in this because we've been doing this for the past 4 quarters. So that's kind of where, like where I come in is that when they're ready to scale and they're looking for that alignment and they need more predictability.
Okay, well, let's talk systems then.
Okay.
Coming in as a fractional CMO, what actually makes a revenue engine predictable,
Yeah. So when I come in, I don't just look at marketing. And that's the part where a lot of folks might misinterpret this. I look at the entire business holistically. So to create that revenue engine, we can't just be like, okay, marketing does this and then just hands leads over to sales, and then hopefully operations can fulfill everything. It doesn't work like that. So we need to look at everything. We need to look at the marketing piece. We need to look at the rev ops piece. We need to look at the sales piece, and we need to look at the customer success piece, because they're all one. It all works as a team. And so in order to create that proper engine, is that in that scalability and predictability, you need to understand that, if you're finding something that's working fine on the marketing side, we need to see how that's converting on the sales side. Like, so you're getting, let's say, 100 leads a month as an example, but then you're getting no conversion out of it. Well, that means that you're not doing a good job. And so you can't create predictability there. And so how I look at it is you want to make sure that you're building with every single step, every stage that you're looking at, and you're analyzing where the conversions are at different points. And then you're also kind of like talking to your other peers. You're not working in silos. You're talking to sales and you're saying, hey, we generated these leads. You moved them down to this pipeline. Like, why didn't they convert? What's going on here? What are the conversations? And then you're getting feedback. And then so you start adjusting your strategy accordingly. And this is going to be taking a lot of back and forth. At the beginning, it's finger pointing. It's like, you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And that's not true. You're not making phone calls, and it's okay. It's important that you get that. But then you've got to start saying, okay, in order for us to speak the same language, we need to have data points that we both agree on, that we all agree on. And that's exactly what I did at my last role is that, at the beginning, it was like everyone pointing fingers at everybody. I'm like, look, I can't really create a strategy based on your feelings, because your feelings could be impacted by like what took place yesterday, or what's taking place now. Like, you've made 20 phone calls and no one answered. I've got to base everything on data. And so what we started doing is we based everything on data, and we would have every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks conversations. Like, all right, this is what the data says. Okay. What's going on from this stage to this stage? And they explain, like, okay, that makes sense. So I go, if I can get more of these people in this stage, We're doing good. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So you can't tell me your feelings. That's a separate conversation, but that creates that predictability where you can look at your pipeline and say, okay, when we have X amount of leads, we know that about X amount is going to be showing up on the SQL level, the sales qualified lead. And then we know how that's going to convert at the very end.
I totally agree. If you don't measure it, you can't improve it.
Yeah.
And so when it comes down to it, what metrics do you think owners should obsess over versus what they can ignore?
So a lot of the times I believe that founders and owners and CEOs are looking at two metrics, leads and revenue. And that doesn't tell the full story. And so I'm not saying revenue is not important, and I'm not saying leads are not important. The metrics that I think are important is, one of them is going to be customer acquisition costs, of what we know as CAC.
Yeah.
So what does it cost us to acquire a customer? And we need to know that very well, because that's when you can start gamifying your strategy. That's whenever you understand that when you put a certain, a dollar in, you get X amount of dollars back. Okay. And so the only way to track that is to know exactly what you are spending to acquire that customer. And it doesn't even matter if it's not spending, advertising. It can literally be just like internal resources. Okay. And you can start with that. You're like, hey, we're not putting advertising dollars into it, but we're basically using organic as our way of building that pipeline. Perfect. Internal resources as a baseline. That becomes like the starting point. From there, I look at conversions at different stages. So one of my favorite ones is the conversion from what I would call is like hero pipeline, HIRO, high intent revenue opportunity. And those are going to be where you're converting essentially like what an SQL is over to a closed one. And that hero pipeline where you know that you're closing over 25%. So what's happening here is that when you know what your hero pipeline is of like, hey, we have 20 deals sitting at this stage, we know that we close at 40%. You already are able to calculate that over and over and over. So that conversion rate from like essentially like an SQL to a closed one, where I call that hero pipeline, then knowing that number, because then what you're thinking about is like, okay, how do I get more of these high quality sales opportunities, high quality sales leads from the top of the funnel? How do I find more of those people? And then you start bringing those people down in different ways. Maybe it's an organic strategy. Maybe it's a paid strategy. Maybe it's an event strategy, but it doesn't matter. You still think about that. So those are just a couple of just really easy ones that can really start following. One is very sales driven and the other one's very marketing driven.
So yeah, I agree with you. I don't really worry about cost per click or anything like that, but I really like CAC and also conversion rates at different points in that sales process as well. So that's what I would love to hone in on. So let's talk a little bit about GTM, go to market. You mentioned scaling across different companies, and you've done that in the past. Like, what does this actually mean in practical terms?
As far as scaling go-to-markets?
Yeah, go-to-markets. Yeah.
This is a hard one, because I think we all have our definition of what go-to-market is. This is my take. Go-to-market is essentially like a vertical or industry that you're going after. It's just like, hey, we're focusing on commercial HVAC. We're focusing on home services, just as an example. And so that becomes like your go-to-market. So like basically whenever I was at my vehicle graphics company, we started off with one go-to-market. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to make that go-to-market become more of no longer like a crapshoot where you're just kind of thinking you're going to be hitting numbers. It's where it's automated and where you can step away from it and do nothing to it for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And it's just still doing its thing. It's essentially how I consider creating a go-to-market engine or go-to-market system. Now it takes time to build that, so I can kind of, dive into that piece a little bit more, but I don't really believe that you should be adding more go-to-markets until one has been built out and has been proven. And that becomes that gives you the revenue floor that your company needs. And so that gives you the focus. And then that gives you the opportunity to tell your story correctly. Because if you're not telling the story correctly, maybe if you're looking for investors, they're going to be asking you like, what's one of your go-to-markets and what's the revenue floor, and they're going to be asking these questions. They're going to be looking at this kind of stuff. And if you don't have that built out, you're not getting any money. And you could be like, but we're changing the industry. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because you have not built a floor that we can depend on, that you can at least hit this even on your worst days. And so that to me is a go-to-market engine. It just works. Your worst salesperson is closing deals because everything else is working.
How do you know when to add a new channel? versus just doubling down on what's working?
So that's a tough one because this is going to be a little bit of art and science. It's going to be one of those where, because you can make the argument on both sides. You can say, well, if we take attention off of this go to market, we're going to see this start collapsing. And so I believe the signal is what's coming inbound and where are there other hand raisers that are organically coming in. So let's say that you're building this go-to-market and you're saying like, you know what? We're getting some hand raisers from like mid-market. This is an example. And we're not even advertising to them. We're not even targeting them. They're just showing up thinking that we can do what they're asking. Let's kind of see how this looks like. And you use that as a signal to go up market or to go down market, depending on where you're at. But don't just go out and be like, we need to create a solution for up market. So we're just going to do this and just throw it out there. That's what most companies would be doing. You want to use the signals that are actually telling you to either go up or down market. And if those signals don't exist, guess what? Don't do it. Maybe what you want to do is you want to add like, sell some fries and a Coke. You want to upsell them, so that's probably your quote unquote go to market for the next stage. But other times it's really looking at the signals that's going to push you into that next vertical that makes sense. But don't go chasing for it because that's where you're going to actually fail and you're going to waste money.
Okay. Well, let's have a little bit of fun now. I'm just sort of ticking over in my head. We're going to kill this random acts of marketing, our enemy right now.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say, okay, let's just pretend I'm an electrician. I've got a marketing budget, like I've got funds. I know I can sort of invest, let's say $2,000. So we're starting little and small.
Yeah.
Where do we start? Because it's like, do I put an ad in the paper? Do I run someone on Google or Meta, or do I do radio, or do I sign write my car? Or what do we do? What's this process that we go through?
So are we looking at $2,000 a month? Is that kind of our budget? Okay,
yep, that's our budget. Yeah.
So if we're looking at $2,000 a month, I would want, before I invest any of those dollars, because everyone's going to be saying like, well, we got to go paid. That's just the natural thing to do. And I'm not going to say paid is bad. I would actually look at ways of how you can build this organic approach where people are coming inbound, because it is easier to close a deal when people are coming in organically and they're not seeing any kind of paid advertising from you, because that's going to be it's just harder to close those deals. I'm not saying those don't ever run ads. I'm not implying that, but I would start kind of, building that piece. If we've already built the organic piece where we're getting some traction internally, where, we got a little bit of inbound coming in from our website, then what I would do is I would say, okay, where is our audience typically hanging out? It depends on who your ICP is and where they're kind of interacting. Are they mostly in Meta? Are they more doing like Reddit? That's a great, audience for, depending on, who you're targeting. So I would find out where they're hanging out for the most part. And then I would start putting some low investment dollars into one or two of those channels and commit for, I would say, 3 to 6 months. But this is where people are going to screw this up, is they're going to run ads incorrectly. They're going to be sending people to maybe their homepage. They're going to be sending people to something that doesn't really make sense, or they'll be running the ads as a brand campaign versus a lead campaign. Mm-hmm. And so what you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to make sure you set these things up correctly, knowing what channel you're going into. And you're just going to want to have to feed this. You're going to have to be willing to take a few kicks into the teeth, if you will, to understand that not everything's going to be correct, because you're going to have to make sure your messaging is correct on the ad. You're going to have to make sure that your images or your creative is correct on the ad so that it resonates. You're going to have a lot of split testing. You're going to have the right landing page to take them that tells the right story. And then you're going to have to make sure that you have also the back end, the funnel of the emails, not just one email, but a follow-up series where you're talking to them continuously. And then even if they don't convert, you still need to be in front of them. So even before I put money into paid advertising, these other things need to be built out as well too.
Like, to be fair, the number of small businesses that say, marketing doesn't work, or I tried that and it didn't work. It's like, how long did you try it for? What did you do? How was it set up?
Yep.
Because yes, it does.
It can explode your company. I mean, it can, in a good way and a bad way. If things are going well, you could have a ton of leads going in that could basically break your company. And so, but it does work if it's structured correctly.
Back in the day, so when you first started around that recession, I spent a lot on radio even. Mm-hmm. I haven't touched it for a long time, but percentage-wise of a budget, how much really should be spent online at the different platforms as opposed to print, radio, whatever else is out there?
I'm going to be biased online. I don't really run a lot of print, radio, and those other ones. And this is kind of where I'm at with this. One metric that I look at when it comes to testing out channels is CPM, cost per thousand. What does it cost me for every 1,000 eyeballs to to see me. I'm going to be comparing that across the board. For the most part, digitally, you're able to get more bang for your buck, unless you know for a fact that everyone is listening to radio. Where I would kind of start kind of like tinkering with this is that maybe your product or service is unique and could fit on a podcast. Maybe you go onto a podcast and you use that because you have a very tailored and very niche audience, and that makes sense. And you find 2 or 3 or 4 podcasts that you can be an advertiser on there. I think that's cool. That's totally fine, because you might be willing to spend more per 1,000, eyeballs or listeners, but it's so dialed in that you're going to probably get a handful of phone calls or inquiries from that. So I tend to put most of my budget towards the digital side. And usually what I kind of tell small businesses is that you want to allocate roughly 5 to 10% of top line revenue towards your advertising dollars and your strategy. Now that is going to be it's not going to be like, hiring someone to run your strategy. That should be kind of like put off to the side. This is going to be investing into scaling and growing your company. And now I know it's kind of tough for some companies to be like, that's a lot of money. It totally is, but you've got to commit to that and really make sure that you're doing it for X amount of time and you're only focused on 1 or 2 channels and you're actually analyzing the right kind of metrics before you pull the plug.
Yeah, no, I love it. Okay, this has been gold. So let's have some rapid fire questions for you right now. What do you think is one marketing tactic that is overrated right now?
Overrated. Okay. All right, this is going to sound a little contrarian, but everyone leaning in so hard into AI SEO, and I'm not going to say that AI is not good. I'm not implying that. But right now, the verdict is not out yet as far as if you need to change your SEO strategy to make yourself more searchable on the search engines for LLMs. And this is why I'm saying this. If I want a result to happen in my LLM and ChatGPT, I just need to keep pushing ChatGPT until I get the answer that I want, until I make it say what I'm looking for and find what I'm looking for. It's not based off of like how Google has created their search engine algorithms. So I think that people are over indexing to try to show up in these on the LLM searches. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm simply saying there's not a lot of proof yet. We're still very early at this at the moment. And I still believe that you should, if you're going to be doing SEO, still do it, but still optimize accurately as you normally did for Google and for Bing and the major search engines. And maybe add a couple of tweaks, that helps the LLMs kind of find your stuff. And then from there, let's see how things kind of play out. It doesn't mean that you stop SEO. It just means that you don't be like, well, how do I show up in LLMs for ChatGPT? Don't worry about that. Keep doing what you're doing. Make a couple of adjustments.
So you mentioned AI, ChatGPT specifically. How soon do you reckon before there are going to be paid ads on those channels?
Man, I see it occasionally in my feed. So I don't know how it is in everyone else's LLMs that they're using. Like ChatGPT, every now and then I've seen 1 or 2, they were testing some things. I don't know. I mean, at this point, maybe 3 to 6 months, but
wow. Okay.
I think it's around the corner. I really think it is how they're going to do it. It's going to be interesting. I have no idea how it's going to be influenced. Google did a great job, but we didn't know how that was going to work either. And so but I will say this, be an early adopter. If you start seeing some of these companies, these LLMs that are running ads, and you're watch from the sidelines really quick to see kind of how it works. But I would start being an early adopter, because I do believe this is that back when Google ads came out, which was at the early 2000s, I think.
Early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. So when those came out, you're paying pennies on the dollar for keywords, right? I mean, I could promise you, I would go back to that day any day and pay pennies on a dollar for any keyword.
And that would have been the same on Meta as well.
Exactly my point. It totally was. I mean, I remember the days of the Wild West on Meta. I mean, it was amazing. The lead volumes that you can get. Be an early adopter and just play, and just know that don't overcommit. Don't over rotate and be like, I'm putting all my budget into LLMs. No, be smart, put a percentage, watch and see what happens. And if you see signals, then you continue to kind of feed the beast.
Okay. So we said what's a tactic that's overrated. So what is one growth lever that is underrated for small business?
This is an easy one. It's thought leadership. I don't believe a lot of founders and CEOs put enough leverage into their profiles in building their opinion publicly. Their voice is more powerful than the CRO in that company. Their voice is more powerful than the VP or the CMO of that company. Why? Because they are the founders. They created something that is so unique and different. And so I really believe that. And on top of that, like if you're on LinkedIn as an example, I mean, it is one of the great platforms that still pushes organic opportunity, and they're giving you some other opportunities too, where you can actually pay for your own organic post, your personal post, to just get eyeballs, And so I think putting time and effort into building your brand, your personal brand as a thought leader, and it sounds like cliche, like, oh, Javier, come on, man, thought leadership. Like I've heard that one before, but put the time into it because people will find you. And eventually what's going to happen is that the VP of sales is going to be like, they heard you on a podcast and now they're buying. And so those are signals, and that's what you double down in.
And you're living proof right now. You're doing it on this podcast.
Exactly.
Okay, last one to fire at you. If you had to give a founder one rule for the next 12 months, okay, what would it be?
One rule.
Of course, that's what we're talking about.
Say that one more time.
In marketing, what's a rule that you want to give them for 12 months and just say, just do this?
I would say this is probably going to be relatively easy. If we touch this a little bit, commit to the strategy. Don't commit to the strategy, lower your expectations, but commit to the strategy. We all need guardrails. So help us create the guardrails, and we need to commit to the strategy. It doesn't mean that you don't pivot. It just means that, hey, we believe in this, and make some bets, because you're going to ship things that are probably going to be, 70, 80, 90%. That's okay. Don't ship it at 100% because it will never get delivered. So commit to the strategy and ship these things and let the market determine what's going to be good and bad. Because if the market's telling you this is not good, great. Strategy is working. Now we pivot a little bit in the strategy and we keep going forward, because now we're not going to focus on this thing.
Yeah, this has been sharp. Okay. I love it.
Awesome.
For listeners who are realizing that they might be stuck now in random acts of marketing, still makes me smile that. Where's the best place to find you and learn more about your work?
Two places. So I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I believe I am the only Javier Lozano Jr. So just put the search in there. I connect with you and I do comment. If you send me a DM, I'm happy to talk with you and, kind of point you in the right direction, that sort of stuff. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. And you could also go to my website, bouldermediasolutions.com. I've got a free newsletter on there. I've got a pipeline diagnostic on there that's for free as well too. That helps you kind of figure out where you have some leaks in your revenue pipeline. So those are the two places that you can find me. And if you have questions, I'm happy to help.
Brilliant. Love it. Now, if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking differently about your business now, whether it's sales, systems, or strategy, that is the point. So if you do want help identifying your biggest bottleneck, mapping out your next steps, your next smart move, you can also book in a free breakthrough session with myself and the Coachbirds team, which is, just a no-pressure strategy call designed to give you clarity, focus, clear action plan. Javier, thanks again for coming on and sharing your experience. To everyone listening, remember this: growth is not random, it is built. So keep building smart, and hopefully we'll see you again. Let's talk small business. I appreciate you tuning in. If you got value, hit subscribe, like, or drop a comment. It spreads the word and might just help another legend get their breakthrough.